The following Agios-supported podcast is intended for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Please speak with your healthcare professional before making any treatment decisions. The guests on today's show were paid to participate in this podcast.
What's up, Cheat Codes listeners? It's me, Dr. Z.
And me, Dr. C.
Dr. C, when I decided to make the move over to Agios, one of the key components there for me was this group that works there called Patient Advocacy.
They're like the unsung heroes.
Truly, in a rare disease company, particularly in a company looking at sickle cell disease, thalassemia, and something ultra rare like pyruvate kinase deficiency, you really need those types of people that keep you true on your course.
Really bring in the people whose voices we need to hear.
100%.
To do right.
Exactly. So for me, that was a big part of me coming over. And today our guest is a critical piece to the patient advocacy puzzle at Agios.
She's so important. I think I'm going to learn a lot.
Yeah, same. Are you ready to jump into our segment?
Let's do it.
All right, let's go. Cheat Codes listeners, we have a fantastic guest today. We've got Miss Janie Davis. Welcome, Janie.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So Janie is Director of Patient Advocacy at Agios and is a critical part of what I think is really the spirit of the company. But Janie, for people who may be out there wondering, what the heck does patient advocacy do? Tell us a little bit about what your job entails.
What my job entails is being an advocate in the community, being an advocate within Agios is really important. I always see it as an opportunity to bring in the patient voice into everything we do across the company and to represent our sickle cell warriors and all the work that we do. And working with the community, learning, gaining insights, really sharing that. And it's everything from cheat codes to doing workshops to attending conferences and really having an opportunity to learn more about the community and then how can we help to address those unmet needs that the community may have?
I was going to ask how you got into patient advocacy. What was your origin story?
So my origin story was I started off in pharma a couple of years ago, and I started working actually in sales. And I had an opportunity to work with clinicians like yourself and share information about our products. And what was very clear early on was the impact that it made to the patients. I later moved still within the hematology space into marketing. But in marketing, what I did, I worked a lot with patients. And then I started working with patient advocacy organizations. So it was very clear to me that was my calling, was learning about the patient, looking at beyond just the product, but how do we understand what their origin story is and how we can continue to help them. And so I always consider myself to be an advocate personally in my personal life as a caregiver, but then marrying that professionally with what I do.
That's amazing. I want to go deeper on that. But before we do, I want to set the stage a little bit more. Who is Janie Davis? Where did your story start?
I am from the south side of Chicago. I am the fifth child of 7, and my story started there, working with my family, understanding, always advocating on their behalf on different, whether it was health issues or personal issues. My family is very much about community. And so that is where my heart starts and where I continue to always draw back and near to. I had the privilege of being a caregiver for my dad who had Alzheimer's. And that was definitely a time for advocacy because he truly had no voice. But I also knew who he was and an essence of who he was. So I always knew what he would want to do. And so I was that advocate on his behalf. I am a mom of 2.
Yeah.
I have a son who is a sports writer, a daughter in college, and I also advocated on their behalf. And so that was very clear as a responsibility and a guiding principle in my life. And currently, for my mom, I'm an advocate as she's older and has some health challenges as well. And because I did work in pharmaceuticals and in the biotech area, my family always thinks, hey, the doctor said, what does that mean? I'm like, did you ask them? So then I quickly learned I need to go to the doctor with them.
Yeah.
Or afterwards, really sit down and delve into to understand exactly what challenges or issues or what the medication was, to really let them know the why. Why are they taking it? What does it mean? How does it help? If you're having issues, how do they then advocate on their own behalf?
Wow.
That was my start.
That's amazing.
Agios is a biopharmaceutical company that's fueled by connections with patient communities, healthcare professionals, patients, and each other. Building on these connections and the company's unmatched leadership in the field of cellular metabolism, Agios is pioneering therapies of genetically defined diseases, a broad group of rare and more common diseases that are typically severe and life-threatening. Near term, Agios is focusing on hemolytic and acquired anemias, including sickle cell disease, pyruvate kinase or PK deficiency, and thalassemia. To learn more, visit agios.com. That's agios.com.
Go ahead, Dr. C.
I was going to say, I can imagine those experiences with your dad inform your perspective on patients dealing with healthcare. And how does that play into what you're doing now? How does that inform what you're doing or help you to do it better?
I think it informs it and understanding the sensitivity of that while his situation was different, if you have a warrior that's in the middle of a crisis, that they may not be able to advocate for themselves. They may not be able to speak for themselves. And that's where that similarity. I also have family members with sickle cell. So understanding their story and how challenges that they've overcome. And so that becomes a thread and the connection through from a patient advocacy perspective, how do you ensure that the patient voice is always heard, whether they're there or when they're not there is probably even more important.
It's amazing. It's true that those types of experiences, those types of connections are so grounding in how you approach your job. The thing that I didn't know any of this about you, right? And it makes so much sense for me now, seeing the way you approach patient advocacy, knowing that you basically have been an advocate your whole life for patients, one way or another. So first of all, thank you. You have a big task at Agios in really being the voice and the force of patient advocacy in sickle cell disease. There's a lot happening as we move forward into the year. As you've gotten more familiar with the sickle cell disease community, tell us a little bit about that experience. How has that been for you? How's it been meeting the CBOs and the advocates? What are the highlights of the last few years?
I think for me, the highlights is it feels very much like family. It feels very much like home. The sickle cell community is very embracing. And for those who are coming into the community, there has been so many challenges that they've had. And so they're happy to see someone who is focusing on them. And it comes through in all of your interactions, whether that's working with a CBO or a patient advocate. That has been my grounding takeaway is they're very creative in how they navigate and address their challenges and issues, but they bring you in to partner with them. And they're looking for ways in which they can collaborate and do things with us. And so that's a very unique perspective that the community brings. And I have been overwhelmed by the generosity of spirit from the community. And what my goal and hope for is as we at Agios continue to work with the community, that we not only meet their expectations, but exceed their expectations in all that we do.
That's a high bar. I know this year is going to be very busy for you. What are you looking forward to most as we go into 2024?
I think I'm looking forward to most is what we're doing as far as increasing clinical trial awareness. The community, there has obvious been history and historical context to what the community has dealt with. And there is an opportunity to really share more about what clinical trials are, what they aren't. But most importantly, is an opportunity for us to learn. And how we can learn from the community and really understand their perspective. I know a number of different initiatives we've worked on that we may be going one way and then we hear from the community and sometimes we got to make a complete turnaround or make a slight adjustment. But it's so important that they continue to give us that without filter. And I many times don't have to say that, but like we want to hear it very clearly and to be able to make those adjustments and learn from the community. But that's what I'm looking forward to, is how can we increase awareness of clinical trials within the community and the process and what that potential could be.
One thing I think is amazing around advocacy is you engage the community, you listen to the community, but I think you also build a community. I see patients come together, patients and treaters and pharma, and really start to build friendships and create these long-term dialogues and really a community that is more than the sum of its parts. And that keeps growing. Are there things you do intentionally to try to build those things? Or is that just something that happens along the way?
There is some things that happen organically by being in space and being in community and being open and to developing relationships and collaboration. But then there are other things that are very strategic and thinking about based upon input that we get from the community of different initiatives and programs. And when you make it a relationship, then that's when you're able to build friendships, when you're able to build greater, because then it's not just about taking, it's about giving, and really that whole partnership and collaboration that occurs as well. But there's a lot of thought put in it. It looks easier than it really is.
You guys make it look easy.
For sure, for sure. Janie, for the warriors that may be listening to this episode and hearing maybe that there are companies that have patient advocacy, what message do you have for them? What message do you want them to take away from this episode as far as knowing that there are people like you who are working on a side of the sickle cell community that may not be super visible to them?
I think that's exactly it, that we are here working on their behalf and that we are looking at opportunities to impact their quality of life, how they live, their lived experience, and we're looking for their input. And so when there is an opportunity to connect with us, if there are ideas or things that they have, when they see us in community, to reach out and to have a conversation. Holly John and I, who also works within our patient advocacy team, are very approachable. And we're always looking to connect with the community. So that's probably the biggest one, is really that we are here for them in whatever capacity and thoughts that they may have to really reach out, or when we see them or when we reach out, know that we really are interested in what you have to say genuinely. And we're looking for ways in which we can continue to partner and collaborate with the community.
It's an amazing message, and it's truly a privilege to be able to work with you and watch you navigate the community and build these relationships and connections. Thank you for all you do, Janie.
Well, thank you. Thank you for talking with me today. I'm excited about being here.
Absolutely. Anytime. I know we didn't call this a Rising Star episode, but I'm pretty sure Miss Janie Davis is a rising star in patient advocacy.
A very bright star. And I think this episode made me reflect on how lucky we are at Agios to have this great patient advocacy team. And I think as a company trying to make therapies for people with sickle cell, you have to be out there talking to people with sickle cell
100%.
and having some guidance about what people want and getting input on how they can participate. And we're so lucky to have a strong group in advocacy that really gives us that North Star.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't have said it any better. Even the way that they spent this last year, and we saw this approach to evidence-based patient advocacy, and we saw conference after conference where patient advocacy was represented. It was such a beautiful thing. I think such a beautiful thing is being built here, and I'm just happy to be able to watch from the sides and cheer on.
No, it's wonderful, and I've made a lot of friends through this. And it does feel like this is just building a really strong community that hopefully can drive forward good things for the sickle cell community at large.
Absolutely. With that being said, please be sure to follow Miss Janie Davis and her work in patient advocacy at Agios. You can always follow me, Dr. Z, at Dr. Z Sickle Cell.
And me at Imagineer.
Please follow, subscribe to Cheat Codes, and if you found this informational, please share this with someone who you think could find it informational. With that being said, keep living well with sickle cell. Anything else, Dr. C?
Thanks, Janie. Great talking with you today, and hope the listeners love this podcast as much as I did.
With that, peace.